Welcome, everybody. My name is Itamar Medeiros. I'm a designer and a strategist, originally from Brazil, but I'm currently living in Germany. And today, what I want to make a quick pitch is around this idea that I'm combining two very popular frameworks today: the concept of managing by outcomes, or outcomes versus outputs, and jobs to be done, to bridge the gap from strategy to execution, right? So the three things that I want to talk about today is basically a rally cry to designers and strategists. Like, if they really want to see the strategy carry through, um, they need to start getting involved into defining outcomes and measures for projects. And if you might be thinking already, well, but I'm not the one defining measures and outcomes for my projects, then you need to get really good at start influencing those decisions with stakeholders. The second thing that we're going to talk about is obviously what is an outcome and why an outcome creates focus and alignment, and why does it eliminate needless work, right? And then the third thing we're going to talk about is, and this is where I'm going to show how the two frameworks come together, is like jobs to be done provide this objective way for us to discuss value, like what do customers perceive as value, and how does it help us visualize the alignment between our customer outcomes and our own organizational outcomes, right? So let's jump right in. You've probably been in that place where as soon as the strategy is created, the different stakeholders jump straight into turning that strategy into a list of features or detailed project plans. Or worse, right? Sometimes the list of features or the roadmap is the strategy. And just to make sure that I'm not misunderstood, I'm not suggesting that a list of features or a well-intended project plan is a strategy, is not a strategy. But that's usually where a lot of projects that I've been involved, that's where it comes in, right? And you've probably, and you probably see in the list of features described a lot of outputs, like what is that we want to work on, but it doesn't necessarily describes why we want to work on these things and what is the value that we're trying to create. And you've seen pictures like this, right, where like it's very funny, like how the different parts of the organization, like the different functional teams, interpret the so-called requirements. And as soon as the teams start working off on those strategies without a clear understanding, like what are the problems that they should be trying to solve and what is the value that they should be creating, and somehow the funny part of all of these things, like somehow people are surprised that the products don't perform as expected when it comes to customer satisfaction, or or things or other kind of metrics like adoption and retention and so on, right? So the idea here is like the first thing is like the outcome is going to be that basically that thing that is going to bring alignment in terms of like what is that the customers are trying to do, right? So to ensure that the strategy is taking hold and basically like you really want to carry it over the execution, you really need to get involved on defining outcomes and measures. And then you at some point, I think we need to start thinking about like what do you mean by outcomes, and what are you talking about measures? Maybe I'll leave the measures for a second now, and maybe we'll talk about outcomes, right? So the difference between outcomes and outputs is this: the outputs is the outputs are like the products, the services, the profits, the what, right? And the outcomes create the meaning, like what are the relationships and the difference, the why, right? The outputs are things that the our businesses expect, things like revenue and profit and so on. And they fund the outcomes, but without the outcomes, there is no need for the outputs, right? So we're using outcomes to create these alignments, right? So um, when you're helping the teams understand what are the outcomes that the business expects and what is the customer trying to get done or the users are trying to get done, it becomes a much easier conversation in terms of facilitating that discussion, because basically now we have some sort of a common goal that we're trying to address, right? Say, what are the user or customer behaviors that drive the business result that we're trying to create? How do we get people to do more of these things, right? And how do we know that we are right, right? And this is where jobs to be done becomes a good kind of common currency to describe those outcomes, right? So when the team engages in these really endless discussions around like what do customers perceive as values, jobs to be done provides a way for us to understand and discuss what these customer values are, and it helps us visualize, right? And the example that and just to make sure that we're very clear what we're talking about here, let me give an example of what we mean by jobs to be done, right? If you haven't heard of the methodology, jobs to be done is this pretty straightforward focus on what are people's objectives independent of the, like, how do we want to accomplish them, right? So for example, basically it's like what people are trying to do decouple from the solution, right? So from that perspective, jobs to be done help us understand the customer needs, help predict like how better customers might act in the future. And you've probably seen this example, like the people don't want a 1/4-inch drill. What they want is a hole in the wall. Actually, they don't want neither the drill, not the hole in the wall. What they want is it's something else, right? They might want to hang a picture on the wall, right? So jobs to be done provides this really objective way of us understand and discuss what the customers and users perceive as value, right? In the case of the drill here, impact drill is an incredibly feature-rich machine capable of making all kinds of holes in many types of surfaces and materials. But when all the people want is just to hang a picture on the wall, one could argue that the tape can actually be perceived by the customers with higher value because it allows them to do these other jobs that the drill cannot, right? So for example, the tape minimizes the amount of cleaning afterwards. The tape minimizes the amount of noise that you create while you're trying to hang a picture. And the tape minimizes the amount of painting that you have to do afterwards, right? So basically, this is where jobs to be done becomes this advantage of becoming a common currency between leadership, designers, product managers, and developers, right? Let's say the jobs to be done describe what users are trying to get done in terms of why, which in turn provide a good framing to discuss the objectives of the team, right? So the what's and of the solutions and the hows, right? So if you can find that sweet spot between what is our business is like, what is the impact that we're trying to create in terms of revenue growth, customer satisfaction, and then you try to understand like what are the behaviors that our users, like what are the things that they're trying to get done, the intersection, like what are the measurable changes in behavior that's going to drive the business impact. Jobs to be done becomes that common currency to describe, right? And one of the things that we've been using this framework to describe, and this is where I come to the wrap up of this presentation, is this idea of help visualize the alignment, right? So jobs to be done, in this case here, we're creating alignment diagrams to facilitate these strategy discussions where you can help the team connect the dots between the functionality that they're considering in the roadmaps and the value that users are trying to create in the application, right? So for example, in this presentation, in this workshop, you're gonna see how to create these alignment diagrams where you have jobs to be done, both functional, emotional, social, and then the functionality that you're trying to create. And on the top of that, even be able to create the roadmaps, right? Now, soon, or later. So yes, that's my pitch. So thank you everybody for stopping by. If you want to know more about this topic, you can check the QR code there, and I hope to see you next time.